Hello everyone, welcome back to Jikook Magic. Have you ever seen a relationship so close, so natural, that words feel inadequate to explain it? Not because it lacks meaning, but because the meaning is too deep to be confined by labels. The relationship between Jungkook and Jimin is a form of natural closeness that doesn't shout, doesn't declare itself, yet is constantly felt. It lives in the small details, in gestures that slip past the spotlight, in spontaneous reactions that don't even realize they're being watched. And today we're going to talk about one simple moment, almost overlooked, that left many people silent. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was too honest to ignore. The relationship between Jungkook and Jimin is the kind that, the longer you observe it, the harder it becomes to define. Not because it's confusing, but because it seems to exist in a space unreachable by any label. Every word feels insufficient. Every definition feels restrictive. It is beautiful to watch, the kind of beauty that brings a small smile and a quiet sigh, yet at the same time far too complex to be explained by simple logic. This is because their closeness isn't built on grand statements or theatrical gestures, but on small, almost unnoticed actions. And it's precisely from these details that something much greater is formed. As Jikook fans, we often react emotionally to certain moments. Smiling to ourselves, replaying the same clip over and over, then falling silent when asked to explain what exactly made our hearts feel touched. Often, it's not about what they do, but how they do it. About naturalness. About the absence of filters. About a sense of comfort that feels undeniably real. A comfort that doesn't appear designed to be displayed, yet surfaces effortlessly. Gestures, looks, and attitudes like these feel intimate not because they're explicit, but because they're honest. A closeness that isn't forced, doesn't need justification, and doesn't ask to be understood. At times, this dynamic even resembles that of a romantic couple. Not because of a forced narrative, but because the level of trust between them feels so deep, something rarely seen even in many close relationships. Among the many moments that catch the fandom's attention, there is one that stands out not for its drama, but for its simplicity. This moment occurred during a challenge on the show Are You Sure? A lighthearted game that seemed trivial. The rules were simple. Close your eyes, taste the food, and guess the flavor. Nothing seemed special. There was no indication that this would become one of the most talked about moments. In that challenge, Jimin was given an alcoholic chocolate. As soon as he bit into it, his reaction was spontaneous and deeply human. The unexpected taste shocked him. He felt repulsed and, without thinking, spat the liquid from the chocolate onto the plate. The scene was funny, honest, and endearing in its naturalness. No dramatization, just an instinctive response to something unexpected. But what truly made many people fall silent wasn't Jimin's reaction. It was what happened afterward. When it was Jungkook's turn to taste, he placed his hand on the plate and brought the contents to his mouth, without hesitation, without pause, without any awkward expression. At first glance, the gesture might seem ordinary, as if he were simply taking another piece. But when observed more closely, it became clear that what he tasted was not an intact piece of chocolate. Jimin hadn't even chewed it. He had only bitten slightly, tasted the alcohol, and then expelled the liquid. Liquid that had already been in his mouth. And that was what Jungkook tasted. There was no camera cut, no editing to soften the moment. Everything flowed naturally, as if there were nothing to emphasize. And precisely because of that, many people were stunned. Because this is not a common gesture. For most people, tasting something that has just come out of someone else's mouth is a clear boundary. One that usually triggers disgust or at least a moment of hesitation. But in this case, there was no such reaction. Jungkook didn't look disturbed. He didn't laugh nervously. He didn't show discomfort. He simply did it as if it were the most normal thing in the world. And that's where its resonance lies. Not in the gesture itself, but in its naturalness. The moment didn't feel planned, wasn't done to provoke reactions, and didn't seem to be recognized as something that crossed a line. It was spontaneous, automatic, almost habitual, as if that level of closeness had already been fully normalized between them. Some people reflexively labeled it gross, and socially that reaction is understandable. But that's precisely where the question arises. Because boundaries like these usually only disappear when there is profound trust, extreme closeness, and a connection that eliminates any sense of rejection. What stands out most is the fact that neither of them reacted as if something extraordinary had just happened. There was no shift in energy, no awkwardness, no explanation. Everything continued with complete normalcy. And for many people, that was the most eye-opening part. Because when something doesn't require thought, doesn't trigger a reaction, and isn't considered strange, it often means it has already become part of an established intimacy. A closeness that isn't questioned because it simply already exists. And it's in details like these that the connection between Jungkook and Jimin feels so real. Not because it can be defined, but because it can be felt. This is organic closeness, unforced affection, chemistry that appears even when they aren't trying to show it. Perhaps that's why this relationship continues to stir so many emotions. Because it isn't announced, explained, or imposed. It simply exists, in the simplest and most unexpected moments, leaving behind a quiet certainty that there is something special between them. Something that doesn't need a name to be felt. And it is precisely that undefinable quality that makes it so captivating. In the end, maybe this is what keeps Jungkook and Jimin's relationship captivating so many hearts. Not because it's easy to explain, not because it needs justification, but because the closeness feels real, normal for them, and precisely because of that, extraordinary for those of us who witness it. Not everything needs a name to have meaning. Not all intimacy needs to be announced to be felt. If you feel the same resonance from these small details, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. Because at Jikook Magic, we don't force definitions. We simply let the feeling exist and speak for itself.